Hi, I'm Amanda Webb, and welcome to Her Time, Her Place. This is a podcast about women stepping into their moment, owning their place, and sharing what it really took to get there. In each episode, I'll sit down with women from all walks of life to explore the turning points, the moments of doubt, the decisions that changed everything, the people who showed up, and the lessons they've carried forward. Because so many of us have been told, or have quietly told ourselves, that it's not the time. It's not the place, not yet. This podcast is all about questioning that, choosing it anyway, and discovering what's possible when we do. Let's go.
Her Time, Her Place is proudly brought to you by Explore for Success. Through coaching, career programs, leadership development, and unique travel experiences, Explore supports women to embrace who they are, discover what's next, back themselves, and pursue careers and lives filled with purpose and possibility. To learn more, visit explore.net.au.
Hi, I'm Amanda Webb, and welcome to Her Time, Her Place. Today, I am joined by Avril Henry. Avril, welcome to Her Time, Her Place.
Hi, Amanda. I'm so happy to be here, given how many times and with how many people our paths have crossed. So thank you for having me on today.
I am so delighted to have you here. The first time I ever heard you speak was actually 30 years ago when I was a young up-and-coming HR professional at Westpac. So it is really exciting to be here together to have this conversation. Avril, you have had an extraordinary career spanning more than 4 decades across countries, industries and disciplines, from finance and tech into HR, leadership, consulting, speaking, coaching. You're an entrepreneur and you've advised some of Australia's most senior leaders. You've also spent much of that career challenging the way we think about leadership, gender, diversity and the workplace. And I'm very delighted that in 2024, that contribution was recognised when you were appointed a member of the Order of Australia. Now, we could spend today's entire conversation simply walking through your CV, but we are absolutely not going to do that. There's too much gold here to be shared. Too much gold. So what I'm much more interested in is the woman behind that career, the choices you've made, the things that you've challenged, the risks you've taken, and what you've learned along the way. So over those 40 years of working and leading, I want to know what's mattered to you and what's making a difference for you now. So Avril, I'd love to start right there. What has it been to become Avril? When you look back at the younger Avril starting out, what was already there in her that you now recognise as fundamental to the woman you are today?
I think the thing that sticks in my head the most are 2 incidents. One when I was about 11 years old and one when I was 15. And I grew up in South Africa during apartheid. And when you grow up in apartheid as a white South African, you are expected to simply accept that it is what it is. And in fact, the whole principle of apartheid was balance and basically promoted on the premise of one Bible text, be ye not unequally yoked. And the Afrikaner, because it was predominantly the Afrikaans political party, the National Party, who introduced apartheid and basically said we as white people were there to take care of the blacks because they were inferior. And I remember when I was 11 years old at Sabbath school, because I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist, questioning in one of our equivalent of a Sunday school lesson, I said, black people the same as white people? Aren't they just a different colour? And the teacher said to me, what do you mean? And I said, well, do they have red blood like us? And she said, yes. And I said, well, then aren't they the same as us, just a different colour? And she said, I'll need to speak to your mother. And when my mother came to get me, she said to my mother, you know, your daughter is asking questions about apartheid and politics that are inappropriate for a child. And I think she is going to be trouble. And I chuckle about it now because in my career, and you may well be aware of this, I have at times been referred to as difficult or outspoken or too direct.
Yep.
And the second incident was when I was 16. Oh, by the way, after that conversation, I went and spoke to my maternal grandmother, Pearl. And I've got a book coming out on the 1st of October, and there's a whole chapter in there called Pearl of Wisdom, which is all the lessons I learned from my maternal grandmother, who had the greatest impact on me as a young girl until I was 17. Way more than any teacher or both my parents. And she was somebody I could trust. And so I said to her, I had this conversation, I got in trouble over it, and I said, but I thought God created all people.
Yeah.
And she said, yes, he did. And I said, well, I thought he created us all equal. And she said, yes, he did, but not everybody understands that.
Yeah.
And she said, in this country, she said, we have different laws. And she said to me, she lived 100 years ahead of her time, Amanda. She said to me, always be respectful to all people.
Yeah.
And always be kind and give people the benefit of the doubt. She said, but you do need to be careful what you say and who you say it to. That was when I was 11.
Yeah.
Fast forward 5 years or 4 years, I'm now 16. And I'm in my last 2 years of high school. And for my subject selection for my last 2 years of high school, I pick the equivalent of, in Australia, 3-unit economics and 3-unit maths. And I get called to the principal's office. So I went to a bilingual co-ed school, and my principal was Afrikaans. He also happened to be a brigadier in the South African Army Reserve. And he ran the school like an army officer. Fridays, we used to have to do marching before school. Yeah, you get the picture.
I do.
He said to me, why have you picked boys' subjects for the next 2 years? And I said, I don't understand. And he said, you have picked 3-unit maths and 3-unit economics. Those are boys' subjects. What's wrong with doing shorthand and typing? And I looked at him and I said, I don't understand what you mean. And he said, well, all the other girls in the school are doing shorthand and typing or domestic science. And I said, I want to go to university. I don't want to do shorthand and typing. And if I do them, I can't go to university. And he said, what's wrong with being a nurse, a teacher, or a bank teller? And I said, well, I don't want to be a nurse because I don't like blood. I don't want to be a teacher because I don't like children. And I don't want to work in a bank. And he said, that's the problem with girls like you. You don't know your place. My school principal.
Oh, you've had them all. My God.
And so I had to do, he couldn't stop me, but I did 3-unit maths and 3-unit economics.
Well done.
In Afrikaans, because there was only myself and one other English-speaking girl, and there were 2 Afrikaans-speaking girls who wanted to do maths.
Yes.
And then there was me doing economics, because all the other girls were doing typing and shorthand.
That's
And,
incredible.
I just look back on that and I think to myself, and then I had the conversation with my grandmother again. And you know what she said to me? She said, Avril, God gave you a good brain.
Yes.
Use your brain. Study hard because you're going to have to get a scholarship or a bursary to go to university. Because I grew up in a low-income family in social housing. And she said, you get out of this town, go to university, and then get out of this country. My grandmother. During apartheid.
Do you know, there's so much in that I love. I love Pearl's wisdom. That is amazing. Your maternal grandmother, what a wonderful influence and great advice that she gave you. Also, from your story, the nature-nurture thing comes to play as well for you, right? Like this was inbuilt in you. I was going to ask you about, do you feel like the challenging of the status quo, when did that start? But it seems like it was natured into you. seeing that
Yeah.
sense of justice and, challenging that process in a respectful way is what I'm also
Yeah.
hearing. Your grandmother's advice there of you've got a good brain, go and study and get out of this town. So I'm guessing that becomes a bit of a turning point for you because you did come to
I did.
Australia from South Africa
did.
as a young woman. And essentially, I'm guessing that's to start again in a new country.
Yes.
And since
Yes.
then, you've had an incredibly varied career. So rather than take us through all of it, when you look back over those 40 years, what decisions or moments most profoundly changed the direction of your life?
Well, the first one was obviously, when I had that realization at high school that girls weren't supposed to do what boys did. And I'll pick it up from there because I did win a scholarship. I became dux of my school and I won the De
Amazing.
Beers scholarship. So back then, De Beers provided 70% of the world's diamonds. And before corporate social responsibility became a thing, they gave a fully funded scholarship to the dux of every high school. And I got the scholarship for my school. I have to say, I felt a little bit of perverse pleasure that I was dux of my school, given the experience I'd had with my principal.
I think you should
Anyway,
have.
I went on to university. I thought about what can I study at university that will ensure employability? I mean, like what 17-year-old thinks like that, right? Yeah. And so I thought I'd also done accounting at school and I topped the class in accounting. I topped the class in commerce. And so I went, well, I'm good at numbers, not maths. Accountancy. And so I did a double degree in accounting and economics at the University of Cape Town. And in my first year class, there were 400 of us, but only 14 girls.
Wow.
At the end of 4 years, 150 of us graduated. Of the 150 that qualified, 14 girls finished. All the girls finished.
Wow. Amazing.
There was another point at which I went. Girls actually can do anything, but we're still outnumbered in the careers and jobs that make money.
Yes.
And that have value. As much as we talk about valuing teachers and nurses, I think it's a disgrace that we do not value them more because teachers educate the next generation and nurses take care of the sick and the health of the country. But that's another topic for another day.
It is.
Anyway, so when I decided, and when I was at university, it's funny that we are having this conversation and that my new book comes out on the 1st of October because it's a memoir and it starts from when I was 3. And it's really about my underlying values around social justice, equity and fairness.
Yes.
Because in 1976, another turning point at university was the 1976 riots in South Africa, which fundamentally was the beginning of the turning point of the dismantling of apartheid, which took another 18 years. But those riots were recognised and reported on globally. And after those riots, countries banned South Africa from participating in sport, which was an absolute killer when it came to rugby and cricket. And companies like IBM, Coca-Cola, all those sorts of organisations, BP, all the oil companies put economic sanctions on South Africa.
Yeah, that's right.
And there were only 2 white universities that joined the protests because it was predominantly black people that protested. And the 2 white universities that protested was my university, the University of Cape Town, and the University of Wits in Johannesburg. And I have to say, I've never talked about those riots. I've never written about those riots until I wrote this book. And I have to say, it was torturous writing about it because I'd done such a good job of containing it. And when I wrote about it, the first thing my editor said is, you wrote one line. I was part of the 1976 riots. And she said to me, UTF? She said,
Yeah.
I need to understand what it was like and how you
Yes.
participated. Go back and
Yeah.
rewrite it. And I wrote about it. And when I started writing about it, I could smell the tear gas. I could hear the sounds of the police dogs. I could hear the sounds of the guns. And even as I'm talking to you now, I have got goosebumps.
That
And those were the riots that took place in Cape Town outside the town hall. But
Yeah.
we also had protests for the whole month of June on our campus. And the police came and tear gassed us. They dragged people away by their head. They threw people into paddy wagons. And there were people who were never seen again. And, you know, that stuck in my head. And
Yeah.
over the next 3 years, as I actually in the workplace met for the first time coloured and Indian people, not so much black people, but coloured and Indian people in the workplace, I went, this is so wrong. And
Yeah.
when I studied labour economics and I realised that we had this Mixed Marriage Act and we had this Job Reservation Act where if I was a white person with a year 12 and you were a black person with a PhD, I had to get the job. And I went, this just cannot be. And you've got three choices. You can put up and shut up, and I'm never going to do that. You can speak out and disappear, and many people died. Or you get out, and that's what I did because I also thought about my family and their safety.
Yep.
And so that was a big turning point because I came to
Absolutely.
Australia with $500 and 2 suitcases, and I did not tell my parents I was emigrating. I told my parents I was coming on a working holiday.
Wow.
And 2 weeks after I arrived in Australia, because it was pre the internet, I sent them a telegram. I'm not coming back. Stop. I have emigrated to Australia. Stop. I'm sorry I did not tell you. Stop. Then 2 weeks after that, I sent them another telegram. I got married yesterday. He was my boyfriend from Cape Town. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. 4 months after that, I wrote them a letter and sent them a photograph, which basically said, P.S., he's black. And as they say, the proverbial shit hit the fan. And my father and my father's side of the family basically ostracized me from there on in. I continued to have a relationship with my father, but it was very strained, but it was always strained, you know, from when I was quite young.
Yeah.
And the only reason I think my mother's side of the family, and not all of them, were willing to be conditionally accepting was Granny Pearl said, I love her. I know her. She would not have done this if it wasn't the right thing for her. So I accept her choices.
Yeah.
You can take it or leave it. If you choose not to support her, I don't want to discuss it with you.
Avril, that is so much. Like that journey, like I did not know you had been a part of the protest. This young girl at 11 and 16 who is questioning things around equity, equality, race, discrimination is at university in 76. Like sometimes I just go, the right people are at the right places for you to be a part of that and to see that firsthand. But as you said, that must have been harrowing to go through that. And the fact that you can still feel that, I've got goosebumps while you're sharing that. But that reinforcement that I can do nothing, I can take some action, but I need to be wise. And Granny Pearl giving that wisdom, like you need to protect yourself and your family, and that the safe thing for you, the wise thing was to leave home, which is a huge choice and decision to make. When that kind of settled and you had your family afar, were you able to then set up a life here.
Yeah. And I'll add one other thing because it's going to be news to any family members who read the book, is that I also left because by 21, I was on the security police watch list in South Africa.
Right.
So I had twice had them come to my apartment at midnight. And I look back now and go, oh my God, how did I do that when I was 20 and 21? That was scary. They were not nice people,
No.
you know.
No.
So I came to Australia and I thought to myself, this is the promised land. And for me, it has been in many ways, but there'll be no racism here. And there'll be no sexism or misogyny here. So I'm just going to have this great life. But in order to show my gratitude to Australia for giving me the opportunity to create a new life, I will work to make a difference. I didn't know what that would be, but I was going to make a difference. And it started from the minute I got off the plane on the 27th of May, 80. It was a sunny day. It was before we had air bridges. You stepped off the top of the plane, you walked down the stairs and you walked across the tarmac to the terminal building. I remember exactly what I was wearing. I remember the time. I remember it as if it happened yesterday. It was 9:10 in the morning. And as I stepped out of the plane, I looked up into the sky and I had this overwhelming feeling of I'm home.
Wow.
Because I never felt like I belonged in South Africa. Never felt like I belonged.
So
And I've
interesting.
always felt like I belong here. And there have been moments when I haven't belonged in workplaces and in certain suburbs. But from a country perspective, when I went and worked in London in the 90s, I was homesick for Australia. In a way, I was never homesick for South Africa, ever. So when I got here, I started work in finance first, and I was married to my first husband. And I would say that that first 10 years in Australia was simply about establishing a home. In that time, we had 2 children. I was working in finance. From there, I went to Barclays. And interestingly, every time I changed jobs either because it was a better job or because, as happened in that first job, I was being treated differently because I was female.
Yeah, right.
And it was in 1985 when I went to Barclays as the first female manager when it got its foreign banking license. I left my previous organisation where I was the financial controller, and they brought a new guy in to be the lease administration manager. I had already finished my degree, you know, and my qualification in South Africa. I was currently doing my CPA qualifications. I actually finished my last exam about 4 weeks after my first child was born.
Amazing.
And I found out that the guy that they'd hired, they were paying him $5,000 more than me, which at the time was about 20% more than me. They gave him a company car. And he had the same title and he was the same level as me. And he hadn't even finished his business degree.
Wow.
So what I did was the following weekend, I got the newspaper and I cut out all the jobs for financial controllers where people were being paid more than me.
Yeah.
And I made an appointment with the CEO and I went to see him and I showed him these ads. And I used that as the main point for wanting a pay rise and a company car. And I said, oh, and by the way, I said, Joe over there, who you've just given a job to, hasn't finished his degree, is being paid more than me and has a company car. And he said, but he has a wife to support. I said, but I'm the breadwinner in my family and I have a young child.
How did that go down?
Well, I got the pay rise and I got the car.
Good.
And I stayed probably another 18 months. And then when they created the position of the finance director, I wasn't even considered for the role. They brought somebody in from outside. So I resigned and left. And I went to Barclays. Anyway, after Barclays, 3 years at Barclays, I was actually offered a job as a senior manager in finance at an investment bank. And I did 2 years with that company here in Australia. And while I was there, we had somebody from the UK here who offered me a job in London. And can I tell you, as a young girl, I used to dream about travelling to and potentially working in London and New York.
Yep.
And I wanted to travel to Hong Kong and Paris and Rome. And
Beautiful.
I've ticked it all off now. My husband, I have to say, really struggled with how white Australia was
Yep.
coming from South Africa. And he missed his people, he missed his culture. We did have a number of unpleasant incidents in that first 10 years in Australia, which involved him on the basis of race. Pulling into a garage on a road trip in Goulburn, where we went in to pay for petrol, and he was in front of me, and he went to pay the petrol, and the guy behind the counter said to him, "Can I help you?"
Oh, my Lord.
And my husband turned and he looked at me and he said, "Do you reckon this guy's deaf or just stupid?" And I said, "Potentially both."
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, and when we got to Canberra, one of the first questions people asked us, we were invited to dinner at a place where we didn't know the people except the people we went with. And they asked my husband where he'd learned to speak English so well before coming to Australia.
Yeah.
So, those sort of things he'd experienced in South Africa, and here he was experiencing them again in the Promised Land.
Yeah.
And when we went to London, ironically, and I could see it, he actually found the UK as racist as South Africa and had many bad experiences. And that coupled with, not really settling within 2 years of coming back to Australia, we split up.
Yeah.
And the irony was my family thought we'd split up because it was cultural, because I was white and he was black. And I said it wasn't about culture. I said it was a mismatch. And I think in many ways it was a mismatch from the start. And but when you're young and you're in love, you think you can make things work, even though the signs are there that it might not work.
Absolutely. I think that's a very understandable story. And, I'm sure you look back with happiness and joy about your children and that whole experience.
Absolutely.
You probably wouldn't swap it either, right? But
No.
also having that empathy with your wisdom to be able to go, actually, that being a person of a different colour in the white world, it's hard for us to empathise. We haven't got that lived experience. I can imagine, certainly back in the 80s and 90s, it wouldn't have been easy here in Australia and in Sydney. Yeah, globally, I think that would have still been hard.
A turning point at that time, not so much the marriage breakup, but something that happened in the middle of that. I remember this woman said to me many years earlier, she was in her 70s, one of the icons of technology, and she said, in your life you have 3 balls. You have work and your career, you have your life with your family, and you have your health and your well-being. If you drop one ball and still keep the other 2 in the air, you'll be fine. If you drop 2 balls, you're in serious trouble. And if you drop 3, you're up the creek without a paddle, so to speak. And everything was falling apart. And I was struggling with some of the people in the team that I was in at Westpac, because I was the only female on the team, and their idea of team building was golf days, which didn't include me, so I didn't understand how that was team building. And it was at about that time that Anne Sherry arrived at Westpac in 1993, and she saw me do a presentation to the senior executive team as head of finance for technology operations and corporate services on some technology that I thought we should invest in. And I presented the business case. And after that, she asked me to come and see her. And she said, that was a really good presentation. And I said, thank you. She said, you've got a good way, not only with figures, but explaining it in layman's terms, in terms of not only the economic benefits, but the costs of not doing it. And she said, I'd really like you to come and work for me in HR and organisational change. And like a good accountant, Amanda, I said, I don't think so. HR, that's not a real job. And we still laugh because, she's my best boss. She became my mentor for many years and she's now one of my closest girlfriends. She said, you don't think I'm hiring you for your people skills, do you? Because you don't have any.
That's a bit harsh.
Yeah. Anyway, she said, I'm hiring you for your finance skills and your understanding of business, because if I'm going to do anything in terms of change and culture in this organisation, I need somebody who understands numbers and speaks the language of the business. And Anne and I've talked about this many times. The thing I'm most proud of in my career was that Anne and I were the two women who introduced paid maternity leave in Australia in March of 1995. And once we did it, other companies followed.
Yep.
And it was only 6 weeks maternity leave and 1 week's paternity leave. And it didn't change for decades. But the reality is that was the starting point. And major change, I've realised, unfortunately, like you see what's happening with childcare, takes 10, 20, 30 years.
Absolutely.
And to this day, people still remember that it was Anne and I who introduced paid maternity leave at Westpac.
Yes.
But the reality is it wasn't just for Westpac, it was for Australia, because we were the first.
Yep. I also like in that story that Anne saw in you how you used your voice, because this is a bit of a pattern for you. I associate you as someone who has this great willingness to challenge the accepted thinking and say what you believe needs to be said.
I am willing to use my voice, but I always, always, always do my homework. And that's really important. If you're going to challenge something, do your homework.
Yeah.
So I will say this, I am not erratic or spontaneous in the way I use my voice. I'm very considered, but I will do my homework. And the reason that was approved by the board and the senior executive team was because the numbers were there.
Absolutely.
That's why it got approved. And over the next 12 months, the other thing I introduced was employer-sponsored childcare in every shape and form, before and after school care, school holiday care.
Yep.
We did partnerships with childcare centres where we bought places for Westpac employees. And you might remember we built the biggest childcare centre owned by an organisation in Adelaide at the Mortgage Processing
Centre. Yeah. So was it 1996?
Yeah.
I'm an Adelaide girl. Originally, that's where I started my Westpac career. I wasn't in the MPC, but I know friends of mine that did work there, and the fact that they had childcare was an absolute winner for the organisation. So, but I didn't know that you had been a part of that as well. So you made a really good point there, Avril, about not just challenging situation and accepted thinking, but that you always did your research. You always had the wisdom, which is also the example of cutting out all the job ads and going to your boss and saying, here's all of these other job ads out there, and using that as a part of your negotiation. So that very strategic, smart brain of yours. And I think it's a great piece of advice to people. Have your say, challenge things, but make sure you know your stuff. Have your data, be ready for that. And prepared, and always stay above the line. I see you online with commentary as well. I've seen you in editorial pieces, and you are always above the line, but well-researched, but asking the question that many others are not brave enough to ask. So I'm curious to know, has that challenge or speaking up for you ever come at a cost?
Actually, that's a good question. When I think about my corporate roles, I think sometimes it may have come at a cost, and I might not have realised it at the time. So, for example, I did that role with Anne for 3 years. And I would have been happy to stay in that role for a few more years. Mind you, I had told Anne I was only coming for a year, because you'll love this, Amanda. It was only going to take a year to learn everything there was to learn about people and HR.
Of course.
Boy, was I wrong. I never went back to finance. I've always used the skills, but I've never gone back to finance roles.
Yeah.
But when Anne was then promoted, they took me out of the diversity role and they wanted to make me the HR generalist for finance. And I said to them, I don't even want that job. I like working in diversity. I'm making a difference.
Yeah.
But bear in mind, in the preceding 12 months, I had run a very assertive, some may say aggressive, education program called What's Sex Got to Do with It, to eliminate sexual harassment, gender discrimination and bullying in the workplace. And in fact, we as Westpac, for two of my programs, one called Managing Diversity and one called Addressing Harassment, Sexual Harassment and Bullying in the Workplace, we'd won highly commended awards from the Australian Human Rights Commission. And I won 2 awards for videos that I'd worked on. One was in Chicago. We won the silver medal for an employee education video on childcare. And we were one of 10 finalists in the New York Film and TV Festival for this video where I wrote the script called What's Sex Got to Do with It, and the banks sponsored it, the major banks. Anyway, it was fundamentally changing culture in the workplace and at Christmas parties and Friday night drinks. And I think after a year of doing that and doing 100 presentations in a year where I was only ever home on the weekend, I sometimes wonder whether I was moved because I was having too much impact.
Interesting.
Because I was unhappy about being moved, I left.
Well, do you know what? A HR generalist was never going to be you. That's so not you. But your whole life, since you were 11, and with that sense of fairness and justice, of course you were going to end up doing something like diversity and equity that we see in the world. That is an interesting reflection, though. Were you having too much impact?
I do also think where I've paid a price, and I've actually discussed this at great lengths with people like Anne and Wendy, is I've done quite a number of not-for-profit boards and business associations like the Professional Business and Professional Women's Association, the New South Wales EO Practitioners Association. So all those sort of places, not only have I been on those boards and committees, I've often been the chair, including being the president of the National Diversity Think Tank for a number of years. But every board I've ever applied for, even the ones where I got to the last 2, I didn't get appointed. And, you know, Wendy has often said to me, you know, when you're a change maker and a trailblazer, people worry about how much you're going to challenge the status quo and whether it will disrupt the board or the committee.
Appreciate you sharing that about those board opportunities. I wonder if sometimes we go, she's going to be a bit tough or difficult, or she's going to challenge us. Is that too much? Direct and straightforward are seen as negatives, not as the assets that they are. And I think it is gendered. And because I've never ever heard a man get in trouble for being too direct. I've heard him be called a great leader. He's decisive, but he's not direct. Okay. Have you ever met a man who's too straightforward? I haven't, because that drives me crazy sometimes that we apply this, you know, thing around a woman who's assertive as if that's a negative. It's not in the US. It's not in South Africa.
Years ago, I remember somebody saying, you know, I find you quite aggressive. And I said, 2 questions. Am I ever rude? No. Am I respectful and polite when I speak to you or when I speak in meetings? And he said, always. I said that I'm not aggressive, I'm assertive, because people who are aggressive are rude, arrogant, and threatening.
Yes.
And it's a really good way to describe it.
Absolutely.
Rude, arrogant, and threatening. People who are assertive are direct and decisive and making a contribution.
Yeah, I think that reframe is super important. So it's passionate, it's purposeful, it's with respect. And yes, if you hear the energy in it, the only energy here is passion. So I think it's great to have those reframes. As you get older, do you care less about what other people think than when you did when you were younger?
Absolutely. Like now, I don't care at all.
Yeah.
And can I say, two people, who have had the biggest impact on me. One is Granny Pearl, who told me when I became school captain that what other people think of me is none of my business. And, you've heard that expression before. The other person was Wendy McCarthy, who I met in 1995 when she trained the Australian delegation who were going to the UN Women's Conference in Beijing. We were just having a casual conversation, and I've always remembered this, and we still laugh about it together. And I remember her telling me at the, ripe old age of, 38, and she said, in your 20s and 30s, you care what other people think about you all the time. People at work, you a churchgoer, people at church, people in society, your neighbours, your friends. You get to 40 and you care less, if you're smart, you care less what other people think about you, except your family and friends. You still worry what they think. You still worry what your colleagues think. She said, then you get to 50, and these were her words, and then you don't give a shit anymore what anybody thinks about you, including your family and friends.
Right.
And to that, I add, you are work in progress. And when I turned 60, I went to her and I said, am I right in thinking that you get to 60 and now you tell people how it is? She said, that's exactly right.
I love that. But I'm looking forward to 60 now, because then I get to share with others what I think, do I?
Oh, you get to tell them, not just share what you think, you get to tell them.
Yeah.
And it's quite funny, because I do, as you know, a lot of coaching, and in particular, when I'm working with senior women or young high potential women, one of the first things I teach them is you have to care less what other people think about you if you're going to do things that change the way things are done, and if you want to make change, and if you want to challenge the status quo. You cannot worry what people think about you, because then you won't do it.
Yeah, I think it's great advice, and I think women need to hear it much more often and to actually take on board that advice. You've spent decades advocating for equality, but specifically women and gender equity. You've researched it, you've written about it, you've developed your women's leadership programs, you do coaching around it, and that spans generations that you've been working with. So we've talked a little bit about some of the impact you have had on things that have worked and improved in the workplace over time. But my question is, what hasn't changed nearly enough for women in the workplace?
That is an excellent question. No, there was an announcement yesterday that Australia's gender pay gap has dropped to 11%. And I do think that the Labor Party, and this is not a political statement because you look at the composition of the Labor Party's cabinet for decades now, and there are far more women and always have been than in the Liberal Party cabinet. They have made a contribution, by appointing women not only in government but on government boards, and supporting women in the workplace and the work that's being done with paid maternity leave, etc. So we have made progress in the more than 3 decades I've worked here, and there's no doubt about that. But we're still not listening to women's voices. We still utilise women to fix up messes that have been made by men, whether it's in postal services or airlines or technology companies, without naming any specific companies.
Retailers.
We put women in to fix it up. And if they make one mistake, we crucify them publicly and then get rid of them. But if you look at the gist of what they did fix the organisation. So I think we still judge women far more harshly than men. That's number 2. Number 1 is that we're still not giving women enough leadership positions in the 3 power bases that matter. And the 3 power bases that have mattered since the beginning of time are government, large corporations which have a huge impact on economies, and number 3, religious institutions.
Yes.
And if you look at those 3 power bases, I will never forget hearing Hillary Clinton in 1995 say these words. She said, women do 60% of the world's work for 10% of the world's income and own less than 1% of the world's assets. And they make up 52% of the population. Some of those numbers have changed, but can I say, if you even look at assets, we still own less than 10% of the world's assets. We are still not nearly on par with men when it comes to income. We can talk about pay equity now, but look at superannuation. Look at what's happening to women over 55 who are becoming homeless after decades of raising children and looking after families because they don't have superannuation, because we've never paid them fairly, we've never valued women's work, and we have one of the most segregated workforces in the world. And by the way, so does the US. Women are segregated in low-paid, gender-specific jobs that are about caring and providing community services that are not valued in the same way as things like government and banking and airlines. And you can tell I'm really passionate about that because I've got daughters and my first grandchild was a girl and I've now got 3 granddaughters. And I look at it and I had hoped, Amanda, that my daughters would not have the same experiences as me. And they're now in their 30s and they are having the same experiences I had. And I'm still not convinced that my 7-year-old granddaughter will have equity in her lifetime. And that sucks.
Yes. It's a really hard pill to swallow, isn't it? And some of us have been working like yourself, like leading this charge and trying to make that impact and trying to make the changes. 11%, that's not too bad, but still all of those other figures and measures, we are still slowly moving towards. It adds up. Absolutely. And it makes me think, are there things we continue to tell women to fix about themselves when it's actually the systems that need fixing?
Yes, I go, women don't need fixing. Systems, policies and processes need fixing. And this is not about being anti-men because I know some very good men, including my second husband, who's been my biggest supporter for the last 2 decades. If we make the world and the workplace better for women, and better for families and better for communities, we make the world a better place for men. It's that simple. It is actually that simple. And you know, Amanda, the other thing that's been proven over and over again through many people doing research and through things like microfinancing, when women have decision-making power and when women have money, they invest in the education and health of their children, which makes us a better educated, healthy society than men. Men, if we look at where money gets invested, it's invested in warfare and infrastructure.
That research continues to come through on a global level.
Absolutely.
Yep. And there's so much to be gained if only we could get decision makers at a government level to see the value of improving the structures and the systems.
In those big companies.
Yes.
So when you look at the ASX, not the 100, look at the ASX 500.
Yep.
You know, when you get past the ASX 200, the number of women on boards and the number of female CEOs, in fact, when you get past the ASX 100, it's almost non-existent.
Yeah, absolutely. We've still got a lot of work to do. But with all of that work that we still have ahead of us, which I know you're still committed to, I want to just take a moment to say you have achieved an enormous amount professionally in your life. At this stage, has your definition of success changed in terms of how you're measuring your life and the success that you have had?
Yes. But I sometimes think we need to be stopped in our tracks. I think achieving things and having a certain amount of financial success to live a comfortable life was inevitable as a measurement for me, having grown up in social housing and a low-income family. And it drove me when my children were young because as a single mum, from when they were 5 and 9, it was about making sure they grew up in a nice home, in a nice area, and they went to good schools and they got to go to university. And I achieved that.
Yeah.
And then it became much more about making an even more pronounced and bigger difference in the space around helping all women, not just, making sure my children had a good life. And then as I've got older, and in particular, having had cancer recently, it really stopped me in my tracks. And fiercely independent and always been a type A personality. And to be in a position where you can't make decisions other than the decision to do as you're told. And I'm not good at being told what to do.
Yep.
And having long recovery periods after surgery and having had half a dozen surgeries across 2 years, it made me more determined. And I love this thought that I can't put more time into my life, but what I can do is put more life into the time I have left.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think I've got another 20, 25 years. So I don't do anything I don't want to do. I don't spend time with people where I don't believe I add value or they add value. And value might be as simple as conversation or a coffee. And I prioritize spending time with my grandchildren and my children and my husband and my dogs because they bring me joy and my close friends.
I love that. So your wording again around that is that you are putting and choosing what you spend your time doing. The time that you put in is to your life because we don't have more hours to find and you can't get it back. I was going to ask you, is there anything you're simply no longer prepared to spend your time or energy on?
And number one is stupid people.
And I think that's absolutely fine. I have another girlfriend who's a non-executive director and she said what you said, stupid people, I haven't got time for that. I need to consciously choose where I spend my time and energy. So what I'd like to wrap up with, Avril, is to get some wisdom from you for the long view. If you were sitting down now with a woman in her late 20s, early 30s, so she's ambitious, she's capable, but perhaps she's still working out who she is and where she belongs, what would you want her to know?
3 things. And number one is clearly the most important. And I didn't learn some of this till my 40s. And some might say even my early 50s. And there's 2 parts to number one, which is to actively listen to people. And active listening means, part 2, you are 100% fully present. You're not on your phone. You're not looking at something on your desk or on your screen, or when it's at home with children or your partner. You're not, like I did one time, stirring the spaghetti saying, I am listening, until she asked me what I said, and I couldn't tell her because I hadn't been listening. And here's the thing. Listening and being present 100% says to someone, you are valuable. I value your opinion and I'm willing to listen to you and give you my undivided attention. And you need to do that as a leader, and you need to do that as a friend and a partner and a parent and a colleague. My most important advice.
Wonderful.
And number 2, you learn far more by listening than you ever learn by speaking. And number 3 is stop worrying what other people think about you, because it's not important and it doesn't matter. And look, for women listening to this, equally important, take care of yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, and financially. You need to exercise, as I know from my days of being involved with Are You OK? 3 to 4 days a week for 20 minutes, even if it's just a walk outside. Eat properly. Get enough sleep. Emotionally, if you need help, ask for help. Ask for help. Mentally, you need to watch out for burnout.
Yes.
And when it comes to financially, I taught my daughters, a man is not a financial plan. Have your own money, have your own super, so you can always take care of yourself. And, I've been criticized for that. And people have said, you're suggesting people can't trust their spouses or partners. I said, I didn't say that. I just said, make sure you can always take care of yourself, because that's why so many women are finding themselves at 55 and over, unable to take care of themselves. And I think it's a tragedy, incredibly sad.
Absolutely. I'm completely with you. I have a 24-year-old daughter. She's first year into her professional career. And we've been talking about financial independence since she was 13. That is great advice for women. We are going to turn to a positive note, because I have a final question for you, Avril, and that is the one that sits at the heart of this podcast. Avril, is this your time, and have you found your place?
Yes, absolutely. And I think I can say it is my time, because it took an enormous amount of courage to write my memoir. And as I said, it comes out on the 1st of October, and it made me think about not only this is my time, but this is also my place, and this is where I belong. I've gone full circle. It's that wonderful quote, by T.S. Eliot, who says, you find yourself at the start of your life and you go on travels, and you go back and you find yourself at the place where you started. And this is home. This is
beautiful.
my place.
Avril, thank you so much for our conversation today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I feel like this has been such a gift for me. So thank you for sharing. It hasn't just been about career, has it really? It's been much more about your life and your experiences and your perspective and your wisdom. I feel like I can picture that 11-year-old girl, and I feel like I've just had a conversation with, the wise version of her today. I love Pearl's wisdom. I think that's been really important in this conversation as well. To everyone that's listening, thank you for joining us on Her Time, Her Place. I hope you absolutely love this conversation with Avril as much as I did. You know that we do an episode every Friday, so there'll be another amazing woman next Friday for you to listen to. But until next time, stay curious, be courageous, and remember that this is your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.